Um, Going with the family theme here, when I met Jack, I had little boys who are now all grown, and he certainly took interest in my family. Always asked about them. Always had, didn't get any stories here about when sort of little critter he might have been, how much trouble he might have been growing up, but he always seemed to have wonderful ideas. And one of my sons, Sam, he was the tough one, reminded me in a lot of ways similar humor to Jack. And come in and say, Jack, Sam's yelling at his teacher, he's in kindergarten. Jack would have some funny story and kind of calm me down, and there's always a little bit of truth in whatever. I just got a little further along. Sam's in grade school, he punched somebody. Jack would have a story, and it was just really wonderful about him taking an interest in my kids. He gave my youngest a whole bunch of cooking equipment as he was upgrading on things, and kid's a chef now. And I know we were not the only family like that. I mean, the support continued, certainly for suggestions about Sam through college and him in a drunk tank. So, but no, Jack was just really wonderful with children. And there you go. That's a sign from Jack to wrap this up. But I went with that because I know he got incredibly close with the Calanchini family, and Michaela and Kent wanted to say something. Now, Dave, walk away here. I'd like to say something. Oh, come on up. Wait, Dave was, I know. Come on up.
I went to high school with Jack, and we were really good friends. In fact, my two other friends over there, the four of us had our lockers all next to each other senior year, and had a lot of fun with locker jokes and that. But one of my favorite things that he did is one morning he came up to me. We all adored our French teacher, and he came up to me with this beautiful bouquet of tulips, and he said, "Since you have first period French, would you give these tulips to Miss Skellin?" I said, "Sure, I'd be glad to." So I walked in, I presented her with the tulips, and she looked at them and she goes, "Those are from my yard." And he lets me be the fall guy. So he's been funny his whole life. We really enjoy having him as our friend. Thank you.
Effortless. I have been thinking about this word a lot since Jack's passing. That's what Jack was to me. He came into my life so easily and naturally. There was no agenda, no ulterior motive, no awkward getting to know you period. I met him when I started working at ILM in 1996. He was the guy who sat on the back stairs outside of D Building smoking a cigarette and reading one paperback novel after another. I used to wonder what his job was because it appeared to be so easy. Effortless. One day we struck up a conversation and that was that. We were friends. I would make a point of walking by the stairs time and time again in hopes to catch Jack on one of his smoke breaks. I knew if he was there, he would make me laugh within seconds, and I would walk away from our brief conversation feeling happy. He was the funniest, wittiest, and most clever person I had ever met. Jack would open his mouth and the most wacky, sometimes inappropriate, but always hilarious comments would just roll off his tongue. Effortless. I loved him for that. A few years later, when I ran into Jack on one of his smoke breaks, I confessed to him that I was unhappy in my current position at the company, but I didn't want to leave ILM. He jumped up, said something to the effect of, "Give me 10 minutes and I'm going to call you at your desk," and took off. Indeed, he did call me and told me to come over to his office that he then shared with Susan Kelly, the head of the Rhoda department at the time. They shut the door and offered me a position in their department, knowing that I had no experience or knowledge of how to actually do the job. They said if I could learn in 2 months' time how to roto, they would put me on a show. And just like that, I had a new career, thanks to Jack and Susan. Effortless. I now appreciate more than ever just how much effort Jack's life really was. He was born in the early 50s and knew from the age of 6 that he was gay. Long before it was socially acceptable, Jack had to figure out when and how to be true to himself, to live his life as a gay man, no matter the consequences. I know it took a great deal of time, courage, and effort for him to come out. And when he did, Jack was loved and embraced by many. Jack worked hard. Over 50 credited films hard. He started his film career before computers were part of the process. He used to roto by hand, and if his hand slipped, there was no undo button. He had to start all over again, and sometimes that meant days' worth of painstaking work. But he adapted with every change to the industry that came his way. New technology, new software, new challenges, new companies, new locations, new bosses, new people, new rules. He loved his job and put a huge amount of effort into performing it to the highest of standards. He made the job appear simple, but it was his years of experience and a finely honed set of skills that were really behind that ease he had. Jack loved his family and his coworkers, many of whom became dear friends, and he put a lot of time and thought into nurturing those relationships, making people laugh, telling a good story, keeping the mood light at work when things got stressful. Jack's gift to all of us was to make sure we were having a good time, to make sure we were entertained and amused. He made us all laugh out loud, a lot. This took skill. It took thoughtfulness. It took love. It took effort. Continuing to remember and love Jack will always be one thing for me: effortless.
So it's been, hello? So it's been a few weeks, and I'm sure a lot of people are feeling pretty similar to me. This whole thing seems really surreal. Like, many of us can remember like that, just recent moments we had. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here, but there's a part of me that expects to see Jack bounding down in the hall and say, "Surprise!" And he'd pull out the biggest practical joke in the history of mankind. And there'd be showgirls and balloons and everybody get a puppy, you know. So, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Kent, and married to Michaela, who worked here for many years. When she and I started dating in 1998, Jack was part of the package. Unfortunately, over the years, we became great friends and ended up spending a lot of time together. I eventually came to regard him as part of my family, and especially after Michaela and I had our 2 boys. And like many of you here, I have lots of funny stories about Jack. I'll start by saying that I enjoy cooking, and he gave me 2 of the greatest compliments about my food I ever received. There was a time many years ago when myself and a group of friends we got really into spicy food, and we decided to have a chili cook-off. And each of us was determined to make the hottest chili possible. So I went kind of crazy, and I made an incredibly spicy batch. I mean, it was ridiculous. So Jack ate a whole bowl of it. And when I asked how he liked it afterward, he said, "It was great, but I feel like I just smoked an entire pack of cigarettes." And then there was a time fairly recently that I made a pork roast and we had people over. Jack enjoyed the meal a lot, and we sent him home with some of the leftover pork roast. And let's just say he was feeling pretty good by the end of the night. He had a few drinks, and we reminded him multiple times, when you get home, put the pork roast in the refrigerator. Well, several days later, he was going through his bag and he found the pork. In a panic, he opened it up, smelled it, decided it was okay, and ate it. When I heard about that, I sent him a text message saying, "I heard you risked your life for my pork roast. It's the greatest compliment I've ever received." And he replied, I couldn't resist, it was so good. So Jack vacationed with us a couple of times in Montana. And on our last trip, some of us wanted to go rafting down the river, and Jack volunteered to babysit our two boys, who were ages 5 and 8 at the time, while we went and did that. Well, we came back a couple hours later, and Jack was outside, peacefully laying down in the hammock, reading a book. And when we went up and said, "Oh, how'd it go with the boys?" He goes, "Oh, they're easy." And we're like, "Well, where are they?" "Oh, they're inside." So we went inside, and there was one boy on the couch with Jack's iPad playing a game, and then the other boy with his iPhone playing a game. So after that, he became known as Uncle Technology. And his other nickname was Mayor Stinky Pants. So Jack made us all laugh, and to me that was an act of love on his part. And laughter and love is going to be a big part of his legacy to those of us who knew him. Jack was definitely a character that's been very well established here this evening. But I want to say that he was a man that had a lot of character as well. He was a moral person. He was honest. He had integrity. These are traits that made me feel honored to have him as a friend and part of my life, and a role model to my sons. Jack also had a lot of courage, and I can only imagine how much it took to come out as a gay man at a time when it was very socially unacceptable. And I can only imagine how much courage it took to watch so many of his friends die during the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s, and how much it took to move forward after that tragic time. So speaking of courage, Jack, we never got to make that Italian sausage that was next on our list. I'm kind of mad about that. But you were a true and loyal friend. You were a great friend. I miss you, I will never forget you, but I love you. Thank you.